Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk upright Japanese plum yew. This is Cephalotaxus harringtonia Fastigiata, and we'll just call it upright Japanese plum yew for the sake of the video. It has an incredible upright habit. This is a conifer that has kind of fine textured 2-inch leaves along each of the upright branches. It forms kind of a vase-shaped shrub as it goes. It's very upright, but slightly wider at the top than it is down at the bottom. Really great plant. It's always been one of my kind of go-to plants. It has this fine texture, pretty tough plant out in the landscape. I think it's overall a little bit tougher than sky pencil holly if you were looking at the two of them at the same time. And just again, one that I've used for many years in landscaping. This is definitely not the fastest growing plant you'll ever own, and pretty much every plum yew is like this. The medium-sized ones, ground covers, they're all a little bit slow, but definitely worth the wait. You might get, let's say, 6 inches of growth out of these in a single season, ultimately reaching 8 to 10 feet, probably a little bit higher in time. Again, slightly vase-shaped, so a little wider up at the top. So let's say 3 to 4 feet ultimately up at the top if you were never pruning on it, and a little narrower down toward the bottom. The flowers are inconspicuous. They're not grown for its flowers in any way, shape, or form, but ultimately on the female plant, she'll end up with this plum-colored fruit on it that's actually quite attractive, and all the various sizes and shapes of plum yews do that exact same thing. These are hardy in zone 6 to 9. That may have some impact on where you put it out in the landscape. I think, in southern areas, this is definitely a part shade or shade evergreen conifer. Up in zone 6, you can definitely put it out in more sun. So these definitely work well as an accent plant, just one planted someplace where you need something that's upright and narrow. Of course, they'll work planted in mass in some sort of screen. If you had a patio and you have a narrow space that you need to screen and it's in a part shade space, kind of the perfect plant for that. Again, just as a specimen plant, definitely work as a container plant in the warmer zones like 8 or 9, and then some sort of windbreak in a patio situation. Just a perfect plant for that. The preference for these would be in a sandy, well-drained soil. For sure, but we have no problem growing them in our clay-based soil here in Raleigh. I'll leave them domed up a little bit if it's in a flatter area, make sure they're not going to stay overly wet, but they don't mind staying, I don't want to say wet, at all, but they don't mind staying a little more moist than some other things, but incredibly drought tolerant. This entire group, when we see the prostrate plum yews, the ones that grow flat to the ground, you can get this version just flat to the ground, and some of the driest shade conditions of any plants that we see out in our travels. So again, they'll become extremely drought tolerant, but they don't mind a spot that's kind of seasonally moist, I have found. And again, though, make sure it's well drained, that it doesn't just stay wet all the time. This is a very low maintenance plant, truly a low maintenance plant. You can fertilize these in early spring with some sort of slow release organic fertilizer. That's what we do in our garden. Probably once established, doesn't even need that, as long as you're seeing this kind of rich green color remain on it. It probably doesn't need a whole lot from you, period. We do, keep the ground mulched around it, keep weeds away from it, and there's just not much you have to do. It can be pruned in the late winter, early spring to get. It won't need any kind of general pruning, but you'll probably have some sort of limb here or there that needs to be removed from it. You can do that whenever. If you're doing any general pruning on it late winter, and you can control the height. You can pick a height here and just keep it there. Keep in mind, any pruning you do from the top is going to make it wider down at the bottom, and you may need to control some of that going forward in the future. They're very deer resistant, which is kind of interesting. This is Cephalotaxus, which means yew-like, okay? But yews get eaten by deer, where these the deer absolutely avoid them, which is kind of neat. And minor insect issues you could get on stressed plants and low, without wind movement, you can get some scale on them. But other than that, really, really low maintenance, tolerant of a lot of different conditions. And again, one of my just go-to plants for landscaping. This is upright Japanese plum yew. Thanks for watching.